All right, when they hire the big shooter in Ben Johnson, we got to go top of the food chain, straight to ESPN and straight to our guy Field Yates, who's joined us at the Super Bowl last year, making time for us today on a busy day, getting his shoulder fixed. His daughter's turning 3, and here to talk Ben Johnson. What do you like about this hire for the Bears, Field? Is the Super Bowl in like clear focus 2025?
Yeah, well, maybe not quite there that soon. That being said, this was a massive hire, as you said. This is one that I felt great about for the Bears. And I have a history of trying to be a little bit more judicious with these head coaching hires and the assessments for this reason. When you haven't seen someone do a job that is quite dissimilar from the job that they did in their prior capacity, because let's be realistic, being a head coach is not just being a coordinator. There's a lot more to it that really sort of separates the good ones from the average ones and the great ones from the good ones. That being said, this job I thought had a particularly unique necessity to it, and that was finding somebody who could tutor Caleb Williams and maximize both him and, frankly, the entirety of the offense. Because while there were some elements of this Bears roster that I perhaps overestimated going into last season, most notably the offensive line, and thinking it would hold up better, truthfully, this team underperformed relative to the talent on the roster. And Ben Johnson, despite never being a head coach before, this is, I think, the most innovative play caller in the NFL. It is not like Ben Johnson was playing with a bunch of aliens in Detroit. It's a very good offensive line. Jared Goff is a very solid quarterback, but this is not taking a Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen offense with Justin Jefferson or, Jamar Chase or CeeDee Lamb or multiple of those wide receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown is fantastic. He's a very different archetype, though, of wide receiver one compared to some of those other guys that I just mentioned. So I think that Ben Johnson, with his proven track record as a play caller and what he can do with the pieces that he has at his disposal now in Chicago, is plenty of reason for optimism. And then on top of that, I really probably could have started here, but let's just call it what it is. I think that coming into this cycle, or once the cycle began, we knew that there were 2 premium head coaching candidates. And you could almost make the argument that there was one, because once the Patriots job became available, it really felt like Mike Vrabel had his eyes and his mind set on that gig. Understandably, he is a Patriots Hall of Famer. He's got deep roots in the area. The Bears were one of, 5 or 6 openings besides that. And there was one candidate that stood out well above the field. That was Ben Johnson. And he probably could have had any of these jobs if he wanted them. And he said, I want the Bears job. That's a very telling reality that regardless of how this all ends up working out, that alone should be celebrated in this moment.
No question about it. And when you talk about, a coach, that had a bunch of aliens and then having to come over to the Bears and adjust, that takes me back to when Mike Martz came to the Bears, and he had coached the greatest show on turf, with Kurt Warner and Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt and Marshall Faulk, and then he comes to the Bears and they're trying to run plays like, well, look, we don't have Marshall Faulk here. There was players that would tell him that in the film room. So I guess that would be my question to you, as we're all excited for Ben Johnson. What is the adjustment that he'll have to make now that he leaves that room to come over to here?
Yeah, one of the things that I wasn't a fan of in the discourse surrounding Ben Johnson and where he might fit as a head coach was the idea that Caleb Williams doesn't fit a Ben Johnson offense, as if we have this 20-year template that says, hey, at every stop along Ben Johnson's career, this is the exact quarterback that he sought. Hey, this is the kind of guy that he wants to have under center. Jared Goff and Ben Johnson were an arranged marriage, right? I mean, in the sense that they traded for Jared Goff. Ben was already in the coaching pipeline there in Detroit, becomes the offensive coordinator with Jared and the play caller with Jared. But I don't think that the reason why the Jared Goff trade got done was because, hey, Ben Johnson really wants this kind of quarterback under center for him. I think that he has shown an adaptability. I think that's really impressive with Ben. I think that what he has shown is he is a talent maximizer. And so do I think there's an adjustment? Sure, there is an adjustment for every head coach, but I would just say this is that we live in this era now where small sample sizes totally reshape what you perceive about a player. Caleb Williams, I don't know, maybe I'm a sucker, but I'm not going to give up on a guy who at this time last year, we were talking about how much of a coup it was for the Bears to have that number 1 pick via Carolina. I think that probably the most, to me, I've always thought that the reason why the perception has changed most dramatically on Caleb is because Jaden Daniels' rookie season. And I'm not here to tell you that Jaden Daniels is not a bona fide star. He is. But the reality is the draft was 8 months ago, 9 months ago now. The Bears made a decision. It's not like they drafted some kid who doesn't have it. The Caleb Williams story is far from written. And I think that Ben Johnson really gives the Bears an opportunity to take this offense much closer to what Caleb Williams' ceiling is, that I still believe is an all-pro or Pro Bowl level quarterback that you can win because of, not just win with.
I mean, he could have gone to the Commanders last year. He was sought after and he passed on that opportunity. So to me, it's like he prefers Caleb to Jaden just based on that decision. You think that's simplifying it too much, Field?
Maybe, it felt like the other factor in play last year was that the Lions, they had taken that big leap forward. And I think they felt like there was some unfinished business. And this year, there's still unfinished business in the sense that they got bounced in the divisional round. That being said, that was, and I know that we don't care about regular seasons that much anymore, but holy cow, that was a great season from the Lions offense. And Ben Johnson in his final game, a game that some people felt, they had some questions at the end of it, specifically because of the play calls that involved Jameson Williams throwing a pass, which I'm not here to say that I loved the play call. I am here to tell you that anybody who's been involved with offensive football and had dialed up a play that involves a non-quarterback throwing the ball, there's a coaching point really for every play. In some plays, there's multiple coaching points. The number one coaching point on a play in which a non-quarterback is throwing the football is if the wide receiver is not wide freaking open, throw the ball into the stands, right? So I'm not trying to, anyways, that's an aside there. But in this game in which some people left with some questions, 31 points, 5 turnovers, over 500 yards of offense.
Right.
Come on now. You can't tell me that wasn't a ridiculous performance on Saturday night. I'm not trying to sit here and say that Jared Goff isn't fantastic. He had an amazing season, right? But Ben's not throwing interceptions, right? Ben's not throwing picks in the end zone that changed the course of that game. So I didn't feel any difference really about either Lions coordinator after that game than I think some people seem to, which is to me a bit reductive of a way of thinking about these coaches as it pertains to their viability as a head coach.
When you look at DeAndre Swift, who the Bears signed here last offseason, and I think he has one more year left on his deal here.
2 more, yep.
2 more, yep. But I think maybe they have an option.
They can get out. They can get out of it, right. But keep going.
Yep.
Right. So that being said, when he was in Detroit, they, traded DeAndre Swift. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to know what you think about Ben Johnson and him kind of being remarried here and what kind of, relationship they can have going forward, or if this is something that's going to become a situation where DeAndre is traded off once again.
I'd be surprised. I have no information to suggest he is going to be traded. I guess nothing should surprise me in the NFL, but that was a different time in DeAndre's career, a different time in Ben Johnson's career. And I don't think that the Lions at that point, I don't know that DeAndre Swift's talent was the issue. It was kind of an opportunity, right? A team that had felt like it was pivoting at running back with Monty and then eventually Jahmyr Gibbs. And what do? You try to get something for a player that probably isn't going to figure in prominently into your roster going forward. The thing that I've always believed fundamentally is the essence of coaching is identifying your players' strengths and doing your best to maximize those strengths. It's not taking square pegs and jamming them into round holes. And DeAndre, I think, has some pretty solid talent. This was a guy who went on a heater in the middle of this season. He was really, really effective for this Bears team. But what I don't want from DeAndre Swift is for him to try to be a guy that's just ramming the ball between the tackles 25 times a game and sees 1 or 2 targets. Don't make him Najee Harris or David Montgomery. Make him a player who can tap into that really solid receiving skill, get him on the perimeter, play him more like maybe what we saw from Tony Pollard a few years ago with the Cowboys when Zeke was still there. I'm just throwing out examples of players who are better suited as satellite guys, not bell cow guys that are trying to, get you 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Which is why every week I seem to be playing DeAndre Swift to go over on receiving yards and won about half of those because I just thought it was obvious that's how you should use him.
Yeah.
Okay. not to put you on the spot here, Field, but give me one free agent if you can, that if you're the Bears, you are hot after when that market starts to get going. Anybody pop to mind?
Yeah, well, I mean, Trey Smith will be a name that I think people are going to connect the dots to for a few reasons. First of all, offensive line's a big issue, right? Second of all, he's an outstanding player. Third of all, he is, of course, a Chief, where Ryan Poles was when he was drafted. And, I don't know, I'm going to sound like I'm biased at this point. I'm going to sound like being a Bears homer. Say whatever you want about the job that Ryan Poles has done building this roster and the holes they need to fill. This job was appealing not just because of Caleb Williams, but because this job's got a lot of flexibility to it going forward. You've got very, very healthy cap structure going forward. Lots of space to work with, not a lot of bad deals. You've moved on from guys like Nate Davis. Big swing and a miss. We get it, right? But how many players on this roster right now are you sitting there and saying to yourself, holy crap, like that's a big headache that we have to go find some medicine for? I say that because what it allows the Bears to do is be pretty dynamic this offseason. If they want to go spend in free agency, they can do so. They've got the resources to. They have planned well enough for the present and the future that dipping their toe into free agency this year is not going to compromise their ability to retain some of the young true blue guys going forward. Trey Smith is a true blue free agent. The reason why he's going to hit the open market, absent a franchise tag, which I am not expecting, is not because the Chiefs don't like him. It's because they got a lot of guys. They got the most expensive quarterback in terms of cash value over the next 4 years. And they've got players getting top of the market money at their respective positions. The Chiefs have an embarrassment of riches of talent. So guys like Trey Smith don't come around very often, but I would equate him to what we saw last year with Xavier McKinney for the Green Bay Packers. The reason why he left the Giants was not because the Giants didn't want him. That guy's a stud. He ended up being a first-team All-Pro. So Trey Smith would be a name that comes to mind for me for Chicago.
Last one from you, Greggy.
To be clear.
Yeah. Last one, Greg. You got one more?
Yes, sir. Obviously at the Super Bowl last year, I threatened you to make sure that Rome Odunze was in your mock draft at 9 for the Bears. And so I'm wondering, when we're talking about how they're going to add pieces and weapons and things of that nature, who should I be threatening you for at 10 for the Bears this year? Is it Ashton Jeanty, or do I need to stick to the meat and potatoes on the trenches?
This is my personal preference. I'd be sticking to the meat and potatoes in the trenches there. That being said, Ashton's a terrific prospect. So people want outrage. They want you to, hey, if they don't do exactly what you tell them to do, you have to be totally mystified by the decision. Fundamentally, I would probably not want to draft a running back 10th overall when you've got needs along the offensive line. But of course, it's going to depend on who is available there at number 10. Right. Could it be a Will Campbell from LSU? Could it be a Josh Simmons from Ohio State, who missed much of this year with the patella injury, but is very, very talented? Kelvin Banks from Texas, Armand Membo from Missouri. There's some guys in this class that have plug-and-play opportunities depending on where they get selected. So I would be thinking about the offensive line if I am the Bears. That being said, if they go big in free agency, that offensive line might become more of a secondary need as opposed to a primary need, and they could address something like running back with Ashton Jeanty, or maybe some of these other premium players that we are seeing emerge, especially on the defensive side of the ball in this year's class.
Fix the O-line, a little speed outside, add a running back. Super Bowl 2025.
Cooking.
Hey, Field, thanks so much for making time. I know it's a busy day for you. We greatly appreciate you coming on the CHGO Bears podcast as always.
I look forward to threatening you in New Orleans, so watch your back.
You're the best. I'm not sure if I'm going to be there, but let me know. Can I get in your hotel room if I get there?
Absolutely. Yes. You can have Mark's room. Absolutely.
The car, always looking out for me.
I'll go straight for you, Field. No, it's no problem. All right, Field, we'll see you.
All righty.
We all silly like the mayor.